He didn't ask who she was, just saw the blood, the twisted leg, and the fear in her eyes. He carried her down 3 miles of mountain trail, alone, with no thought of headlines or reward. The next day, he was fired. The day after that, a helicopter landed outside his home, because the woman he saved was worth $6.2 billion, and she wasn't done with him yet. The cold always made his thoughts quieter. Kevron daily adjusted the strap on his backpack and kept walking, boots pressing into soft dirt, pine needles, and the occasional patch of old snow still clinging to shadowed corners of the trail. Beartooth Pass had been his escape for years. No phones, no sirens, no shift schedules, just sky, silence, and the sound of his own breath. That morning, the wind was sharp enough to bite, but he didn't mind. It was the kind of chill that reminded you were alive. He was rounding a narrow bend, where the trees grew thicker, and the light thinned, when something made him stop. Not a movement, a sound. Small, human, almost a whimper. Kevron froze. He listened, tilting his head slightly, narrowing his eyes. There it was again. A groan, faint, but real, not wind, not wildlife. He stepped off trail. The brush was thick and dry, snapping softly beneath his weight. 30 feet in, a low-hanging branch scraped his arm. Another step, and there, she was half buried in leaves and branches, like the mountain itself had tried to swallow her. Blonde hair matted with blood, hiking pants shredded at the thigh. Her leg was twisted at an angle that made his stomach tighten. Kevron dropped his pack. "Hey," he called, crouching beside her. "Can you hear me?" A faint movement, eyes fluttering open. Confused, afraid. "Don't touch me," she rasped. Who are you?" He held up both hands. "Kevron, I'm a nurse. You're hurt, bad. But I can help." She didn't respond, but she didn't push him away either. That was enough. He moved fast, instinct and training taking over. Her leg was a mess. Swollen, likely a lower tib-fib fracture. Needed to be stabilized. "I need to splint this," he said. "It's gonna hurt." She gave the smallest nod. Tent poles, gauze, t-shirt sleeves for padding. Every motion careful, measured. Her breathing was ragged, but she didn't cry out. Not once. "You alone?" he asked, not looking up. "Just a weekend away," she whispered. "Bad weekend for it." He almost smiled. Could have picked bingo. When he finally lifted her arms under her back and knees, she winced but didn't scream. 3 miles, he muttered, adjusting his grip. "Put me down if you get tired," she murmured. He looked at her. "You already did your part. I'll stop when you need a break." That made her laugh, just a little. "You always hike around saving strangers, only the ones bleeding in bushes." She didn't answer, but her eyes softened. They hadn't made it 10 steps when he slipped, just enough to jar his knee hard into the ground. Pain lanced up his leg, but he didn't stop, because in that moment, she wasn't a stranger. She was someone who needed to get out alive, and that was enough. The trail blurred into a series of careful steps and sharp breaths. Kevron moved slow at first, testing his balance, adjusting his grip. She wasn't heavy, but unconscious weight always pulled different. Her head lolled against his shoulder, lips cracked, breath shallow. Every shift in terrain felt like a new test. Loose gravel, steep inclines, branches clawing at his jacket. Still, he didn't stop. He kept one thought locked in his mind like a mantra. She's alive. She stays that way. It had been years since he'd done field response. Last time was a pile-up on I-90, icy roads and a flipped school bus. But this was different. No backup, no sirens, just him and the sound of wind threading through the trees. She stirred once, murmured something about her phone. "Dead," he said softly. "You fell, broke your leg. I splinted it. You're gonna be okay." She blinked up at him, like she wasn't sure whether to believe it. He didn't need her to. He just needed to keep walking. 2 miles in, his arms started shaking. Not from panic, just pure strain. He shifted her weight, crouched behind a boulder, and let her rest against it while he caught his breath. The sky above was starting to dim, color bleeding toward late afternoon. "Still with me?" he asked. She gave a weak nod. "Name's Blythe." He gave a single nod back. "Kevron." "Didn't ask your name." He smiled, just barely. "Didn't ask yours either." After a minute, he lifted her again. The last mile was a blur of pain and grit. His left knee flared every time he stepped downhill. His right shoulder went numb. But the ranger station finally came into view, small, square and bathed in golden light like a promise. He made it to the porch, kicked the door once with the heel of his boot. It opened fast. Wyatt, a gangly ranger barely out of his 20s, froze in the doorway. "Whoa, what the—" "She's hurt. Fracture. Mild head trauma. Needs evac. Fast." Wyatt jumped into action, grabbed the radio, asked for her name. "Blythe Kessner," she mumbled, eyes barely open. Wyatt turned pale. "Wait, the Blythe Kessner." Kevron looked down at her, confused, but she'd already passed out again. Paramedics arrived 20 minutes later. They didn't ask Kevron for details. They took her vitals, asked her name again, secured her on a stretcher, and lifted her into the chopper like it was any other call. No applause, no thank you. Kevron sat on the station steps after they lifted off. His shirt was soaked, his hands shook slightly from fatigue, but he didn't care. She was safe. That was the job, and he never asked who she was. He stayed on the steps after the helicopter lifted, watching it shrink into the sky, blades slicing the fading light. His arms felt like lead. His shirt clung to his back, damp with sweat and dirt. A sharp ache pulsed in his knee, but he barely noticed. Wyatt came back out with 2 paper cups of water, offering one without a word. Kevron took it and nodded his thanks. They sat in silence for a while, the kind that felt earned. Finally, Wyatt spoke. "You really didn't know who she was?" Kevron frowned. "Didn't ask." Wyatt gave a low whistle, half disbelief, half respect. "That was Blythe Kessner." The name floated for a moment, light as air, heavy as iron. Kevron looked over. "Should I know that?" Wyatt blinked. "She's like one of the richest people in the country. Tech giant, Terra Helix. Clean energy, quiet billionaire type, never does interviews, hardly shows up in public. Rumor is she flies private just to get groceries." Kevron took a long sip of water. "I thought she was just another hiker." "She was," Wyatt said. "To you anyway. That's probably why she didn't say anything." The words sat weird in his chest. He replayed the trail, the fall, the pain in her eyes, her hands trembling. Not once had she told him who she was, not even when she could have, especially not then. "She didn't want the name to matter," he said quietly. Wyatt leaned forward, elbows on knees. "Well, it's gonna matter now." Kevron didn't respond. He stood slowly, stretching out the burn in his back. Every muscle in his body felt like it had been wrung out and left to dry. He checked his phone. No service. "Can I borrow a signal?" he asked. "Landline's inside," Wyatt said, pointing over his shoulder. Kevron stepped back into the station, small, wood-paneled, and lined with maps of nearby trails. The phone sat on the counter, cord curled like a sleeping snake. He didn't call anyone, just stood there for a minute, listening to the distant echo of the chopper's departure, replaying in his head. Blythe Kessner still didn't mean much to him. He didn't know about the corporate wars she'd won, the Energy Summit speeches, the offshore critics. He only knew how pale her skin had looked when he found her, how cold her fingers had gotten, how she hadn't once asked for anything, not even her name to be known. He walked out without using the phone. Wyatt was still on the steps. "You gonna Google her later?" he asked. Kevron shrugged. "Probably. But in truth, he already knew enough. She was someone who could have died alone in the woods, and he'd carried her out. It started with a blurry photo. Kevron was back in his apartment the next evening, a heating pad on his knee, sandwich in one hand, remote in the other. The local news was on low volume, background noise more than anything, until a name caught his ear. Was rescued by a Montana nurse after suffering a fall on Beartooth Pass. The hiker, billionaire CEO Blythe Kessner. Kevron sat up. On screen, grainy footage showed a man, him carrying someone through the trees, jaw clenched, arms shaking. The news anchor's voice softened, like it was trying to sound reverent. A quiet act of heroism by Kevron Daly, an ER nurse at Westbrook Medical, who reportedly hiked 3 miles with Kessner on his back, after stabilizing her fractured leg. No comment yet from Kessner, or the hospital. He stared at the screen. No one had asked him for a comment. By morning his phone was buzzing, unknown numbers, missed calls, Messages from people he hadn't heard from in years. Saw you on the news. That was you, hero much. He didn't respond to any of them. The hallway outside his apartment was unusually quiet when he left for work. Neighbors peeked through barely cracked doors. Someone on the second floor clapped as he passed. He gave a polite nod but didn't stop. At the hospital, things felt different. Not better, just off. Some nurses smiled too hard. Others didn't look at him at all. An attending gave him a tight nod, like he wasn't sure if Kevron should be congratulated or disciplined. He kept his head down, clocked in. The message came an hour later. Lorna Pascoe wants to see you. Now, her office smelled like citrus wipes and recycled air. The blinds were drawn. She didn't offer a seat. You made the news, she said, eyes still on her screen. I noticed, Kevron replied. She folded her hands, finally looking at him. We have protocols, Kevron. You were under emergency call status. If we'd needed you, I didn't get the call. That's not the point. Silence stretched between them. He finally asked, You're saying I should have walked past her? I'm saying the board is concerned about optics. One of them has ties to Terra Helix. They don't want Westbrook caught in a media firestorm, tied to a billionaire. He stared at her. I carried an injured woman down a mountain. That's what this is about. Her jaw tightened. You're on administrative review. Effective immediately. Kevron didn't say anything, didn't argue, didn't beg. He just nodded once, turned around, and walked out, past the ER he'd worked in for 7 years, past the nurses who didn't meet his eyes, past the place where doing the right thing had somehow become the wrong kind of story. The email came at 7:12 a.m. Subject line. Update regarding employment status. No greeting, no explanation. Just a short paragraph and an attached HR document. Effective immediately. Benefits terminated. No severance. The words public distraction floated somewhere in the third sentence, wrapped in corporate phrasing so clean it almost felt polite. Kevron stared at it for a full minute. Not shocked, not really, but hollow, like someone had carved something out of him while he slept. He didn't reply. He didn't have to. The hospital badge went into the drawer by the sink. His stethoscope, still looped neatly from his last shift, sat on the counter untouched. He looked at it like it belonged to someone else now. He got dressed slowly. Jeans, hoodie, boots that still had trail dust along the soles. No destination in mind. He just walked, past the diner, past the grocery store, past the church steps where Sister Louise used to hand out sandwiches in the winter. Everyone seemed quieter that day. A few people nodded at him. One man raised a fist in silent solidarity. A teenager on a skateboard slowed just enough to say, "That was dope, man," then rode off without waiting for a response. But Kevron didn't feel heroic. He felt clean, tired, yes, aching, yes, but not guilty, not bitter, just clear in a way most people rarely get to feel. He stopped by the riverwalk and sat on a bench, watched the wind ripple the water like someone dragging fingers through silk. A small voice in his head whispered, "You did the right thing." A louder voice added, "And they still punished you for it." He let both voices sit. By the time the sun dipped low, he'd circled back home. A handwritten note was taped to his door. Blocky handwriting, purple ink. "You're the talk of the building, man." That was some hero stuff. Tammy and 2B and Rowan, age 13. He smiled. Just a little. That note went on the fridge, right next to an overdue grocery list. Later that night, he stood in the shower, forehead against the tile, let the water run too hot, didn't move for a long time. Somewhere, he knew, a boardroom full of people was congratulating themselves for keeping headlines clean. They didn't know what it felt like to carry someone through pine needles and freezing wind, to feel someone's heartbeat against your chest and know, if I stop now, she doesn't make it. They'd fired him for the attention. But that wasn't his story. His story was in the 3 miles he walked, in the way she clutched his shoulder without asking who he was, in the silence of the trees when no one else was watching. And somewhere inside him, something deeper than anger simply said, "Good, let them underestimate you." The sound came before the light, low, heavy, rhythmic. Kevron blinked awake, heart already thudding. For a second he thought it was a dream, the kind of noise that loops in your head when you've slept too hard. But then the windows started to shake. He sat up. The clock read 6:41 a.m. A coffee mug on the counter trembled against the tile. Outside, dogs were barking. A curtain rod clattered softly against the glass. He stood, barefoot, shirt rumpled, and moved to the window. That's when he saw it. Dust spiraling in the early morning sun, branches bending, neighbors already on porches in robes and pajama pants. And at the center of it all, like something torn from a movie set, was a helicopter, descending onto the empty lot behind his building. Black, sleek, no logos. Kevron didn't move. The blade slowed as the machine touched down, kicking up gravel and leaves, rattling the loose gutter on the complex next door. And then the door opened. The first out was a tall man in a dark coat, expression unreadable behind sunglasses. Two others followed, one with a case in hand, the other scanning the street, like he was waiting for a sniper. And then, a blithe Kessner, hair tied back, sunglasses, a slim cane in one hand. She stepped onto the grass like she'd done it 1,000 times. No cameras, no press, just purpose. Kevron opened his door at the same time. Mrs. Holland did across the hall, her tiny dog yapping wildly in her arms. "You know them?" she asked, eyes wide behind her glasses. Kevron didn't answer. He walked down the steps, socks wet from dew, heart suddenly racing harder than it had on that mountain. Blythe looked up as he approached, slowly pulled her sunglasses down. Their eyes met. "I didn't mean to make a scene," she said. He let out a short breath. "You brought a helicopter to my neighborhood." "I did," she said, almost smiling. "But I had to be sure you'd talk to me." From the balconies above, phones clicked. Someone whispered his name. Kevron didn't care. "You want to come inside?" he asked. She nodded once. "Yes. I'd like that." Inside, his apartment smelled like old coffee and clean laundry. Blythe didn't flinch. Her people stayed outside, just her, the cane, and a leather folder now resting on his small dining table. She looked around, then back at him. "I'm not here to say thank you," she said. He crossed his arms. "No, I already did that." She touched the folder lightly. "I'm here to change your life. If you'll let me." Kevron didn't speak, but something in the air between them shifted, like gravity was tilting. The folder looked out of place on his table. Too polished, too intentional. It sat between a chipped salt shaker and a grocery receipt that hadn't moved in days. Kevron didn't reach for it. He just stood by the sink, arms folded, while Blythe rested both hands on the table, one gripping the cane, the other steadying herself as if the room might tilt. "I've been building something," she said, quietly, off the radar. Kevron raised an eyebrow. "Mobile health units," she continued. "Clinics on wheels, staffed by real nurses, real doctors, no lobbyists, no billing departments. We go to people who've been forgotten." He didn't respond, but something in his jaw tightened. She opened the folder. Inside, documents, maps, diagrams. His name printed clean across the top of one page. "I want you to run one," she said. "Build it from the ground up. Your call on staffing. Supplies, routes. You decide what it looks like." He stared at the pages. "Why me?" "Because you didn't ask who I was when I was bleeding," she said. "You didn't hesitate. You didn't freeze. You just said, 'I got you.'" He let that sit for a beat. "I'm a nurse. That's the job." "No," she said softly. "That's the calling. Most people don't answer it anymore." Kevron walked over slowly, pulled out a chair, sat down without touching the folder. "I just lost my job," he said. "No savings, no backup plan. And now you're offering me this?" "I'm offering you the keys to something real," she replied. "It's not charity. It's a door. You decide if you walk through it." He flipped the first page. Field director, full autonomy, budget lines that made his eyes widen, medical outreach targets, in places he'd never even heard of. Tiny towns, far-off counties, red zones on the healthcare map, no one talked about. "You already picked the first location?" he asked. "No," she said. "I picked you." Kevron leaned back. The air felt thick. "And if I say no?" She smiled faintly. "Then you go on with your life. But I think you're the kind of man who doesn't walk away from purpose, even when it burns." He looked down at his own name again, printed bold and clean across a plan that didn't exist until he carried her out of the woods. She stood slowly. "No rush," she said, heading for the door. But if you say yes, the first van's already parked 2 blocks away, ready to roll. The door clicked behind her. Kevron sat there in silence, the folder still open, pages rustling softly in the breeze coming through the window. He didn't know if it was a rescue or a challenge, but for the first time in days, he didn't feel lost. The folder sat on his table for a day and a half, untouched, unmoved. Kevron walked around it like it was something fragile, dangerous, a live wire, humming with possibility and risk. The internet moved faster than he did. By the next morning, his name was trending in places he never asked to be. Articles with headlines like "Nurse becomes billionaire's chosen savior" and "Hero or opportunist" spilled across his feed. Some praised him, others questioned the timing, the story, the silence. One post read, "Feels a little convenient, doesn't it? Save the rich lady, get a golden ticket." He closed the screen, didn't respond, didn't want to defend something that didn't need defending. But the noise crept in anyway. At the corner coffee shop, the barista asked if the rumors were true, if he'd been paid off, if the van was just a PR stunt. A former patient at the grocery store looked right through him like he'd vanished. It wasn't anger that came. It was something heavier, something that sat in the chest like wet stone. He called Tyron, his cousin down in Spokane. "Man, they're acting like I planned the whole thing," Kevron said, pacing the living room. "Because people don't know what to do when a good man gets handed something without asking," Tyron replied. "They want a catch, a flaw, a reason to tear it down." Kevron rubbed the back of his neck. "I didn't even know who she was." "You don't owe anybody proof of your intent," Tyron said. "But don't let them write the story for you either." That stuck. Later that night, Kevron stood in front of the mirror, shirt off, eyes tired, a thin scar on his shoulder from a car wreck 2 winters ago. He didn't look like a leader. He looked like a man trying to hold himself together. But maybe that was enough. He walked back to the table, opened the folder, ran his finger down the page to the words, "Program Director, Mobile Medical Initiative," a title he hadn't asked for, a mission he couldn't ignore. The next morning, he called the number Blythe had left in the back pocket of the folder. A man answered. Calm, precise. "Mr. Daly." "Yeah," Kevron said. "Tell her I'm in." No hesitation, no second guessing. Because sometimes, life hands you something unexpected. Not because you earned it, not because you were perfect, but because when it mattered you showed up. And now, it was time to lead. The van looked like it didn't belong. Parked outside a weather-worn community center in the middle of nowhere, flat land stretching in every direction, cracked pavement, a faded soda machine humming weakly by the door. But the van stood tall, clean, white, sleek lines, Terra Helix logo stamped low on the corner, like a signature. Kevron stepped out just after dawn, clipboard in hand, Idaho badge clipped to his jacket. The air was sharp with dust and cold. He didn't need to speak. People were already lining up. Mothers with bundled toddlers, elderly men in folding chairs, a boy no older than 10 holding his little sister's hand. They came quietly, not for the name on the side of the van, but for the man who stepped out of it. He moved with intention, eyes level, voice steady, the same way he'd moved through the ER. Except now, there was no overhead page calling his name, no admin watching the clock. Just him, his team, and the people in front of him. He set 2 broken fingers, listened to a teenager's lungs wheeze through old asthma, cleaned a wound that had gone too long without care. At one point he knelt on the ground to explain antibiotics to a woman with limited English and no insurance. 10 hours later, he was still on his feet, back sore, feet numb, heart full, but the silence didn't last. That night someone forwarded him a screenshot, a new post, thousands of shares. He lost his job and gained a mobile clinic. Sounds like someone knew what they were doing. The caption must be nice to have billionaire friends. The rest of us still have to earn our way. Kevron stared at it for a long time. No mention of the hours, the splinters, the miles he drove. No mention of the boy with a fever so high he couldn't speak, or the old man who cried when he was handed his first blood pressure meds in months. Just suspicion. Tyron called again that night, voice tight. "Man, you need to clap back." Kevron didn't answer right away. He looked out the van window toward a gravel parking lot that had turned into a waiting room. "I'm not here to perform," he said. I'm here to work. And he meant it, because the truth wasn't online. It was in the way an elder gripped his hand after getting a vaccine, in the way a girl whispered thank you when he handed her mother a prescription. Let them talk. Let them speculate. He had work to do. The cafe was quiet, neutral, no cameras, no mic, just 2 mugs of black coffee between them and a window catching the early light. Kevron sat across from her, Shiloh Greer, freelance journalist. No makeup, no entourage, just a legal pad and a pen that hadn't moved much since he arrived. I don't want your scandal, she'd said in her email. I want your side. That's why he showed up, not for vindication, for clarity. She sipped her coffee once before speaking. You carried her 3 miles. 4, he said. But I stopped once to rest. Felt like 10. No stretcher. No time. And you didn't know who she was. He shook his head. Didn't care. She was hurt. I knew how to help. That was enough. Shiloh made a small mark on her notepad. Why do you think the story turned? Kevron looked out the window. A woman was helping her toddler into a minivan. Someone walked by with a bag of groceries. People don't like it when someone skips the struggle, he said. They want to believe success only comes one way, and if it doesn't, it must be fake. Do you feel like you skipped the struggle? His eyes met hers. Steady, tired. I got fired for helping someone. Then I got offered a second chance by someone who could have ignored me. I didn't ask for it, but I'm not sorry I accepted it. Shiloh nodded slowly. What do you want people to know? That the work is real, that the pain is real, that none of this is about headlines or handshakes. It's about showing up when no one else will. Another pause. Do you regret stopping on that trail? Kevron didn't even blink. Not for a second. The interview ran 2 days later. No edits, no spin, just his words. He talked about growing up in Helena, about his mom, a home care nurse who worked double shifts so he could finish school, about the friend he lost to a bullet wound in 8th grade, because no one nearby knew CPR. He told the story of the trail, not the billionaire, the blood, the fracture, the wind. People read it. Really read it. Messages flooded in, nurses, patients, strangers in small towns, asking if his van might ever make it to them. A man in Kansas mailed a $20 bill, and a note, can't do much but I believe you. And for the first time in weeks the noise quieted. Not because the world had changed, but because he stopped letting it define him. He hadn't spoken to defend himself. He'd spoken to remember himself. And people finally heard. The van looked different now. Not in design. It was still white, still clean, still quiet on the road. But something about the way people approached it had changed. Kids waved when it pulled up. Elders came early, folding chairs in hand. Volunteers started calling ahead to organize patient lists, help with foot traffic, bring sandwiches for those who came from miles away. Inside, the walls were scuffed. The cabinets had stickers on them now, one with a cartoon heart holding a stethoscope, another that just said "Hope rides here." The floor squeaked near the back fridge. Kevron liked it that way. Meant it was being used. They had 3 vans now, trained staff in every one, a rotating list of towns across 4 states. They went where the coverage maps stopped, where people didn't ask what insurance you had, just if you were in pain. Kevron sat in the driver's seat that morning, paperwork spread across the dash, radio low. He'd just wrapped a clinic in a remote part of South Dakota. 48 patients, 2 emergency transports, a toddler with pneumonia, a grandmother who cried when he handed her a blood pressure cuff she could keep. And in the glove box, folded neatly and worn at the corners, was the letter. He pulled it out sometimes, not often, just when the road got long, or the critics got loud again. I've spent years building an empire, Blythe had written. You reminded me that empires mean nothing if people forget how to serve. He hadn't replied. Didn't need to. The answer was in the work. That letter rode with him through snowstorms and desert heat, through back roads, where GPS didn't work, and towns that hadn't had a clinic in 5 years. It sat quietly between glove manuals and extra pens, a reminder of where it all began. A moment on a mountain, blood, pine needles, a split-second choice. He didn't save her for this. He didn't even know who she was. But she knew who he was, the second he walked away from the spotlight, and back into the work. And that's what made the difference. He didn't just carry her down that day. She lifted him up in return. Not with money, not with fame, but with trust. Real, terrifying, life-altering trust. The kind that says, I see what you are when no one's watching. Let's build something that lasts. Kevron looked out at the empty parking lot, the sun rising behind a line of quiet hills. He tucked the letter back in its place, started the engine. Another town was waiting, and this time, he wasn't walking alone. They fired him for doing the right thing, but she came back with something stronger than a thank you, a chance to build hope where no one else goes. If this story moved you, share it. Remind the world that quiet heroes still exist, and sometimes, the road to change starts with one person choosing to carry someone else.